Welcome to Walk's Wednesday Words, the second of two conversations with Dirk Warenga, the author of the book Presbyterians' Spiritual Journey. Now, in this interview, he talks about what he has done since his spiritual journey looking at the Presbyterian Church.
What's happened since the book came out was I actually started a publishing house that I did for 5-6 years and then got bored with it because you learn that publishing is not about creativity, it's more about keeping track of money. So I sold that and then went into business with another individual who is an atheist, who wanted to publish secular books, which I thought was a great idea, and that was over 10 years ago, and he and I have been working on projects ever since. But when I decided to go ahead and do that, I said, but I want to go into producing documentaries. And so he said, okay, when a good one comes along, that would be good. So we finished our first one a couple years ago, and so that was a success. And then, like I said, 2 years ago after we released it, I turned to my partner and I said, okay, now I get to pick the next one. And so he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to write about rural America. But I said, I want to do it through the lens of US 2, because US 2 has more stories to tell. But I said it has to be the center portion of US 2. In other words, from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan through the plains of Montana. None of the East Coast part and none of the West Coast part. So in other words, the center part, kind of like a center cut. And the reason for that is because of the challenges facing rural Americans. And we've become so urban that we're actually 90% urban population. And so nobody knows about their food. Nobody knows about their energy. Nobody knows about the extraction of resources that have happened over several hundred years along the stretch. Nobody even has been there because when we go across the country now, we either fly or we take an interstate. We don't take a U.S. highway. And so I started on it about 2 years ago, and I basically embedded myself on US 2. So I'm a one-person film crew and interview and writer and you name it. And it will be a companion book going with a movie, documentary. And hopefully release it. In fact, we've been talking with PBS. We're hoping to release it sometime mid-next year. We need to get past the election, and we need to get past, if the election ever ends, and past the pandemic, which also, if it ever ends.
Well, Dirk, I want to just pause for a second and tell you, I can't tell you how interesting that is to me. I love books about roads and the history of roads, and I love, as a bicyclist, I love traveling blue highways, the 2-lane roads, and I don't know about US 2.
You've never read Blue Highways by William Least Moon?
I think that was my first.
Okay, well, I talked to him.
Wow.
And I said, and we named our film as Route to Elsewhere, and Elsewhere is actually an honor back to William Least Moon, because he always talks about elsewhere when he's talking about places that are away from people, and so that was part of it. But we actually are a country of rivers, rail, and highway, in that order. And so when you look at US 2, you're really mostly talking about James J. Hill and the Great Northern Railway. which literally followed the whole pathway, and because obviously the highway wasn't, or road wasn't even built until 1919, and that was not really a road. It was more of a path. But yeah, so yeah, I like the idea of telling a story through a route because it focuses the viewer into knowing what it is you're talking about. And I purposely picked this 5-state region because I needed it to go national. And if it was one state, it wouldn't go national. And purposely picked a topic that is really behind the great divide that we have as a country right now. Because so much of, and I don't know your politics, but whatever, and this is not in any way political, but it actually is, because it's so telling as to the perspective of people who are living elsewhere. And it's really that they feel separated from the rest of the population, and powerless. And I think that a lot of that is what's behind the current administration, at least initially, was the fact that they were looking for the next area was looking for was the next Will Rogers. They wanted somebody that was just plain spoken and didn't care about the how things normally are done, because quite frankly, the way things have normally been done has not played out so good with people in rural America.
That's interesting, and I think Ocala would resonate with that, because Ocala is a small city. We're horse country, surrounded. It's a beautiful place. It's Central Florida, not the beaches.
Oh yeah, you're right up the gut.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not that far from what's the town where everybody rides around in a golf cart?
We are not far from the Villages.
The Villages. Which, by the way, I actually did a follow-up report to the book. Don't know where that ever ended up, but that actually was interviews with people at the Villages, because that Presbyterian church there was exploding in growth at that time.
We now have 3 Presbyterian churches that touch the Villages, in Wildwood and Lake Weir, and Lady Lake is the one you're referring to. And
Yep.
Actually, the Villages are growing into cities where we've had Presbyterian churches, Leesburg and Fruitland Park. It's quite amazing.
Oh yeah. It actually matched up perfectly with the demographics of the denomination, and with people moving in and the community and everything, which is a beautiful story.
Dirk, I promised you a 10-minute conversation. I'm going to edit this. I may edit it into 2 parts, and I am, like so many pastors, I've had to learn iMovie and other things since the pandemic started. And it's been an interesting challenge. And
I know. Believe me, I know. Well, thank you for taking the time to call. And it was fun thinking back about those times where we started the project and finished it.
Well, I am grateful, and I look forward to following you on Facebook and continuing this, and I wish you all the best. Wasn't that interesting to chat with Dirk and hear about his new project? I love stories of rural roads and look forward to his book and documentary about U.S. Route 2. Next week, for my Wednesday Words, I'm going to look at this painting that's behind me, this picture by a 20th century artist. This is a print of a grand painting that's in the National Gallery, and The Last Supper, and I'll talk about why I chose to hang this in the associate pastor's office and why it's spiritual and meaningful to me. See you next week.